This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
Your weekend is not complete without the First Lady of New York Radio. It's the Joan Hamburg Show. Talk Radio 77 WABC.
Part of most Americans' view or information about Hollywood, about Oscars, about all the things, Academy Awards, the entertainment industry, is from reading and from watching Turner Classic Movies and meeting people like Dave Karger, who knows more about the Oscars than almost anyone I hear about or talk to. And we all, sort of looking in, love to hear about the Academy Awards and what goes on in that industry. What happens with the winners? What do people do when they win these things? Is it as big a deal as we think, those of us looking in? Well, no one knows more than Dave Karger. And Dave, to us, it's an audience. It's a huge deal. Is it a big deal? Has it lost its luster at all, or still top?
First of all, hello, Joan, and what a pleasure it is to be talking to you. And it's an interesting question. I think the Oscars have definitely had their ups and downs over the decades, particularly in the last few years. And however, I really do believe that they carry with them still, to people who watch them and people who win them, an aura of prestige that is unlike any other type of recognition in any part of the entertainment industry. And I know we're going to talk about a book that I've written called 50 Oscar Nights. And when I interviewed 50 Oscar winners for this book, that's the one thing that all of their stories, as different as they were, had in common. All of these people really feel the reverence and the importance of that award.
And I'm just curious, from your point of view, how did you come up with 50 Oscar Nights? What made you, of all the books you do, what made you decide this is going to be the big one now?
I've always been fascinated by the Oscars. I started watching them when I was 11 years old, 40 years ago. And I've been writing about them and talking about them for the better part of the last 30 years. I was a writer for Entertainment Weekly magazine for 17 years. I've been the Oscars expert on the Today Show for the last 24 years. And now that I'm a host on Turner Classic Movies, I'm often introducing Oscar-winning and Oscar-nominated movies. So when the opportunity presented itself to write my first book, which came out this year, I wanted to do a book about the Oscars, but I wanted to approach the topic from more of a personal angle. And as opposed to talking about, the stats or this or that, I wanted to hear some personal stories from people like Meryl Streep and Elton John and Mel Brooks about what it was actually like to win. So in this book, 50 Oscar Nights, it's new interviews that I've done with 50 of these winners, Sally Field, Jane Fonda, Lee Grant, and they tell me the story of what it was like to win. What was that day like from the moment they woke up to the moment they went to bed? What did it mean to them? How did they prepare? Who did they go with? What did they say in their speeches? In some cases, what they wore. And it's what the perspective is all these years later, now that they're Oscar winners, in some cases for the last 50 years.
Right. And have the stories differed, or do you see a common thread running through them?
Do you know what? The one thing that really surprised me when I put this book together and did these 50 interviews is how different everyone's story was. There's people like Octavia Spencer from the movie The Help, or Julia Roberts, for whom the Oscar win was truly a Cinderella moment. Everything went great. But then you have people like Jane Fonda, who won her first Oscar for the movie Clute during a time where she was ostracized by a large amount of the Hollywood industry for her political activism. So she was very concerned that if she were to win the Oscar that night, that people would boo her. Right. So she was very nervous. Sally Field, when she won her first Oscar for Norma Ray, she was, in a relationship with Burt Reynolds, who was not very supportive. And when her movie Norma Ray got accepted into the Cannes Film Festival, and she told him she was going to be going to France with the movie, he said, well, you don't think you're going to win anything, do you? And she went on to win every Best Actress award that year. Mira Sorvino won her Oscar for a movie that was distributed by Harvey Weinstein. So her Oscar win, I think all these years later, is a little bit tainted by, his story. So it was interesting to hear all these people's stories because they really ran the gamut. And it showed me that not everyone has entirely positive associations and feelings regarding their Oscar wins.
Yeah, though you would think each winner would be thrilled, but I guess it has its moments. Do most people have them out on the fireplace or the table where you can't miss it when you come to their homes?
It's funny you ask that because in each chapter of the book, I end the chapter with asking each person where do they keep their Oscar. Yeah. And again, I got every answer. And listen, if I had an Oscar, it would be the first thing anyone saw when they walked into my house. But for a lot of people, Dustin Hoffman told me that for many years, he felt very uncomfortable about keeping his Oscars out on display. And it wasn't until after years of therapy that he now feels comfortable having them on his mantle. Rita Moreno, who won for West Side Story in the early 1960s, she had her Oscar in a cardboard box in her garage until her husband, she got married to him a few years after she won. He said, why do you have this in a cardboard box? You earned this. You should have it out. So now she does. So for everyone, it's very different. Some people have it in their public bathroom in their house so people can see it. Other people have it in their bedroom. So it's a private moment. I really enjoyed hearing everyone's answers.
Yeah, me too. We love reading about everyone's answers. And in fact, I think I read in doing some research for you that when the Oscars were given in 2017, there was a mix-up with the envelopes. I don't remember that.
Yeah, Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway were presenting Best Picture, and they were given the Best Actress envelope instead, which was for Emma Stone for La La Land. So when they opened it, they read the film name La La Land. Well, La La Land wasn't the winner. It was Moonlight. So I interview Barry Jenkins in the book. He was the director of Moonlight, and he tells the whole story about what that whole mix-up was like from his point of view.
Yeah, and some of the winners seem very, well, I won't use the word blasé, but you know what I mean. And even though you can't do better than getting an Oscar if you're in that business, right?
It's true, and it is interesting. I talked to Aaron Sorkin, the great screenwriter and the creator of the show The West Wing, and when he won his Oscar for the movie The Social Network, he told me that one of the first things that he thought when he brought it home was, oh, now I really want another one. So it's interesting. You reach this pinnacle, and for some people, it's just not enough.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV Insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV Insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injuries and additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
This is an ad by Regain Couples Therapy and features real testimonials.
This was our first time trying therapy, and honestly, it was long overdue. Looking back, we just wish we had started sooner.
Regain's qualified therapists help couples when they can't get there on their own.
We thought it was intimacy issues, but Andrea helped us uncover a deeper root cause we hadn't even realized was there.
Visit regain.com/couplespod to get 10% off your first month. Regain, couples therapy that works.
Plan on flying? It's time to upgrade to a Real ID. Because in order to board domestic flights, your driver's license or state-issued ID must be a Real ID, or you'll need another acceptable form of identification. So don't wait. Find out how to get your Real ID at tsa.gov/Real ID. That's tsa.gov/Real ID, or visit your local DMV. And then you'll be cleared for takeoff.
You know, Dave, I was in the theater the other night. I haven't been to a movie theater in a long time, and it really made me nervous. There were 7 seats taken in a New York City movie theater. What's going to happen to the movies? How are we going to keep all the, not even the classics, but the new ones going and alive?
It's a great question, Joan. The movie industry is definitely trying to figure all that out. And it seems that unless it's a horror movie or a superhero movie, a lot of the times people feel like, oh, I can wait and see that, when it's streaming on whatever streaming platform I like to watch things on. And people have nice screening setups in their houses these days. And it's a shame because there is something special about that communal experience of watching a movie in a movie theater. And with the movie studios making fewer and fewer films that, a mature adult audience really cares about, I think it's going to be hard for them to get people back in theaters. But then once we keep saying that, then you have a situation like Barbie and Oppenheimer last summer where everybody went and it was packed. So I just think it takes the right kind of film to entice people back to the theater, but there is something very magical about that experience. Always will be.
No, it's the truth. And when I see comedy, I think, how could you not see this kind of film in a movie theater? You need the audience, you need the laughter, you need the feeling of being part of something.
It's so true. That makes a comedy so much better when you hear everyone laughing around you.
Yeah, it's tough. So what is your feeling about movies and what's going on in the world of films?
Well, I do think that, unfortunately, the studios seem much more interested in making a superhero movie or another Lord of the Rings trilogy instead of encouraging filmmakers to create original stories, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So it makes it sad. I mean, but there are some great movies out there. Conclave is really good. There's a terrific film out now called Honora that I would recommend to everybody.
Very good movie.
Yeah, so there are good movies out there. You just have to find them.
And there's so many wonderful actors, too, who are working in a lot of these movies that make a big difference.
It's true. And then a lot of the great actors of today are also making great TV series, because I think there's more opportunities even
and
for
more
them
money
there. That's true. Yep.
But from your experience, is it going to take to give a little oomph to the movies? What's going to make people care more?
Money. Again, it's going to take another situation like Oppenheimer and Barbie, movies like that are not part of a trilogy, although I'm sure there's going to be another Barbie movie, but movies that really break the mold and are interesting original ideas that also do very well and get the critical acclaim and win the Oscars, and more important, make a lot of money. And I think that will help the studios realize and recognize again that there is an audience for something that's not a movie with the number 5 at the end of it.
Right, that's interesting. And how did you personally pick the filmmakers that you wanted to talk to?
Well, in the book, 50 Oscar Nights, obviously I interviewed 50 people. 35 of them I already knew from my years of doing this in the past. So Meryl Streep, Julia Roberts, Nicole Kidman, people that I knew and liked and also knew had an interesting story behind their Oscar win. And then the other 15 was like a wish list of people that I had never interviewed before but really wanted to. So Rita Moreno, I had never interviewed. She was a delight. Mel Brooks, I had never talked to. He was terrific. John Legend, the singer who won a Best Original Song Oscar, I was really happy to talk to him. So it was people that that had historic wins in some cases, and then people that I knew had great stories to tell about their acceptance speech, and then also people that I just was a fan of.
And Dave, were they happy to cooperate, or are they ho-hum?
Can I tell you, it was a pleasure to do these interviews because I think for them, it was a different kind of interview than a type of interview that they normally give, where it's just about whatever movie they have out now. In this case, they were really reminiscing about an important highlight day in their lives and also talking about the perspective that they now have, in some cases, 40, 50, 60 years later, after having won the Academy Award, what it means to them all of these years later. I think they were happy to do it.
Well, it appears that way to us. I'm talking to Dave Karger. You know Dave from Turner Classic Movies. He's the host. And from his expertise, you want to know something about the Oscars? You're going to turn in and find him because there's a lot about the Oscars and it impacts all of us. And do you think it takes getting awards to keep people going to the movies?
I think when an actor wins an Oscar, it's interesting because sometimes they win at the very beginning of their career and sometimes they win at the very end, right? So in some cases, it's a career capping achievement. In some cases, it's something that gives them a name, like Lupita Nyong'o, who won for 12 Years a Slave, her very first movie. It gave her an instant, fantastic career. That's the fascinating thing about the Oscars. You can win it in all these different parts of your career, all these different time frames, and it can mean something different, I think, to each person.
Well, that's really what I was going to ask you. Is it life-changing, career-changing, or you can't really say that as a general statement?
For some people, it didn't change a thing. Halle Berry, who very famously became the first Black winner of the Best Actress Oscar, she likes to say that she expected, a script truck to show up at her house the next day and dump off a whole bunch of scripts for her to choose from. And she said the sad reality is that even though she won an Oscar, the movie studios still weren't producing films with people who looked like her in the lead role. So she feels like even though it's a major honor to have become the first Black Best Actress winner, it didn't change that much. Yep. It's a shame.
Yeah, it's a shame and it's tough. But do you feel optimistic about the world of film and the future?
I feel optimistic about the Oscars, and here's why. We're never going to see the ratings of the telecast that we saw in the 80s and 90s when, dozens of millions of people were watching. It's a more fractured television landscape now. But I do think that because the Oscars have really stayed true to their mission, which is to celebrate and recognize the best in film and not pander to anybody, I do think the importance of the Oscars is going to remain. And it's always going to be a big television watching thing, not like the Super Bowl, but as far as the entertainment world, it'll be the top show. And it's always going to be important, and I think that's great. So it's about to hit 100 years old in 2028, the Oscars, and I'd like to see it continue far beyond that.
Well, let's hope it does. It makes a huge difference in the world of movies. By the way, have you seen any film that you think is worth seeing and special?
I loved Honora. That's my favorite film of the year. There's another film that's out in theaters and on Netflix right now called Emilia Perez that I would recommend to people. And then also Conclave, I think, is well worth seeing.
I thought that was a wonderful film. Beautifully shot.
Me too.
And, really entertaining. So you see a lot of movies in your daily life.
I do, and it's great because I have one foot kind of in today's movies because I do Oscar predictions for the LA Times, and I talk about the Oscars on the Today Show, but then I also have one other foot in the classic film era because of the films that I'm introducing and watching and researching for Turner Classic Movies. So I love that part of my job is that I get to, whenever I can, connect the classic with the contemporary.
Well, you do a great job. We love listening to you and watching you, and you keep us on our toes. So
thank you, Joan. I appreciate it.
Take care, and I look forward to talking to you again, Dave Karger.
Anytime. Okay. Happy holidays.
You too. I'm Joan Hamburg, and you're listening to WAVC. Come on, there's a lot more film straight ahead.